Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another Words, Women, and Wisdom radio show, streaming live on BBS Radio out of California. I'm your host, Yvonne E.L. Silver. I'm based in Calgary at the base of the Rocky Mountains in Canada. If you haven't ever been to Calgary, come on up. We have the Calgary Stampede every July. The first Friday in July, it kicks off for 10 days of partying in cowboy gear and pancake breakfasts everywhere. And a lot of country music artists visit us at that time of year. Shania Twain, I think, is leading our Stampede this year parade. So I'm joined today by a guest who I was really intrigued to have on the show today, Kira Conlin, also hailing from Canada. You're in Vancouver, based in Vancouver, in BC, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so today it's a Canadian show. However, this is an international platform, so we will be dialing in, or we will be encouraging audience listeners to be dialing in from wherever you have internet, wherever you have radio capability, because this is an international show. And the topic is so prevalent for every single person, especially if you are a parent. So we're going to be talking today about meltdowns to magical moments. This is about parenting after toxic breakups. Now, I am delighted that Kara could join me today. Kara is an educator, she's a facilitator, she's a mentor, and she is the founder of an organization called Be the Light, which I will have her share more about in a moment. It's a group that she has founded that is really about what she calls family harmony facilitation, and especially to support parents of young children. And we're bringing in some important elements: compassion, curiosity, cooperation. We'll be diving into this. And the goal is to inspire hope. And I hope that this show does just that for you. Inspire hope and be a bridge for deeper connection through new ways of communication and care. Now, as you know, my passion is communications as well. So we're going to have a juicy conversation. If we haven't met before, you haven't dialed into the Words, Women, and Wisdom radio show before, what's it all about? It's about women who've typically risen from some sort of tragedy to triumph and are now out in the world doing amazing work. And Kara definitely fits in this category, doing amazing, impactful work. You want to grab a pen and paper. Not only are we going to be sharing some highlights, some really valuable information in this conversation today, but there's also going to be a couple of gifts. So you want to make sure that you stick around to the very end, because that's very often when the gifts are shared, and they are highly valued gifts. One from me and something from Kira as well. So let's dive in. Hello, welcome, Kira.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I'm super excited to be here with you and with all your listeners.
Me too. And it's nice to be able to have a chance to take a breath, because right now, as we're speaking, we have forest fires happening all across Canada, BC, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. There's a lot of forest fires. So this is all about bringing lightness to a conversation and being able to breathe easily after you learn some of these concepts. So, as the founder of Be the Light, she definitely believes that when children are finding their way through sometimes dark, sometimes turbulent waters, that we as the parents must be the ones who shine brighter for them and lead with love and awareness. Such an interesting topic. I am curious to hear the backstory, Kira. Like, how did you get started in this work? What was going on in your childhood, your own world, that led you to this important realization that there's a better way?
Wow, that is such a deep question, and one that could take 3 shows to go through or more. But I'll do my best to summarize a little here. Well, in my own childhood, I've experienced a lot. I experienced trauma at a young age, sexual trauma, and had difficult emotional experiences as well. And as I grew up, even though I had a loving family in many regards and I was provided for, I wasn't receiving what I needed to deal with everything that is happening to me. I felt I was emotionally alone. Mhm. And I had this idea in my mind many years ago that I wish it would be different for children. Life took me down paths of teaching, and I've worked with people around the world in helping them to learn English and understand culture and be able to relate to people differently and in a way that's more harmonious and build relationships. But I've always had this passion with children and connection with children remain. And because these wounds that I had in childhood, these experiences that I went through were never addressed, I never processed any of those, any of the emotions, the after effects, the fears, the limiting beliefs and harmful negative beliefs about myself. And
Mm,
I carried those into my relationships.
mm,
And the more committed the relationship was, the deeper the wound that was that I was calling in. And I've been through two marriages. The first, you know, so. I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel appreciated for who I was. I didn't feel I could do anything right. And we just weren't right for each other.
mm.
I didn't take the time to learn the lesson. What brought me into that relationship and what what I wanted to do different. So I got into my second marriage, and it really was what we call like trauma bonding. And rather than love, it was more entanglement.
Right.
And because the psychological abuse started pretty early in the relationship, but and even partway through, I recognized that he was on the outside saying to me and treating me in the way that I had been previously talking to myself because of these unhealed wounds.
Right.
That marriage was extremely painful, and I managed to get out of it safely. Though it took a year to get through the fear afterwards before I could really start in the recovery. And I recognized that that's something that I didn't want to do again. And I saw in others how often this was happening,
Mm,
how many people were getting into committed relationships and marriages as their wounded selves, as opposed to the whole self-loving, um, person. And uh, then children come,
right.
and the cycles continue
Yeah.
because two unhealed individuals are now repeating the wounds that they had done to them
Mm,
and creating new wounds by perhaps splitting up and doing so in a very angry, chaotic way. Or maybe the relationship was more than just toxic, it was abusive. And so there's a huge gap in power dynamics. And now the children are with one parent or they're back and forth and seeing how one was conditioned, and now there's so much to deal with after. And
absolutely.
I just felt that something needed to be done.
This is what women do, isn't it? We experience something that shakes us so much to our core. We look and we say, there has to be a better way. And I am going to be the one who does something about it, right? Classic Gandhi, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Mhm.
And this is what we as women do. We take on that nurturing role, especially when it involves children, right? And being a teacher, you are firsthand exposed to very, very often, I imagine, the outcomes of some of those things that we don't necessarily know are going on at home, but you see how the kids are reacting, right? I actually had supper with a colleague of mine who's a teacher. And we had an interesting conversation. I won't share all the details, but suffice to say that when there is not a calm, awakened parent at home who is really choosing to lead with awareness and love, it makes such a difference to how the kids show up in school, and then some of the behavior that then transpires later on, because we have the opportunity, especially when they're in the first few grades, to really shape what their experience is going to be at school. And we all know that a lot of times the children's personality is already set by the time they're 5, 6, which is very often before they are even starting school in Canada. I started in England at age 5 when I was there. I was growing up in London, England. If you can wonder about the accent, yeah, that's where it's from, London, England. So they start kids in school at 5, and they actually finish at 16, and then you go on and do 2 years of college before you can go on to university. So the school system's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's
The
true.
essence is the same, right?
Yeah, the essence is the same, and what you're saying is true. Their identity is formed by the age of 7, and
Right.
that's why I choose to focus on that younger age, because it's so important for parents to understand not just the verbal communication, but also their nonverbal communication, and
Mm,
how even when they think they are protecting their child by not speaking to them about certain things, the child can sense the energy, they can sense the parent's emotion, and when there isn't some kind of communication, then they will interpret it, and it's often misinterpreted because they're doing it from their own cognitive level. And
right.
so there are ways to address things at age appropriate levels, and ways to moderate in situations, and allow them to express their feelings. And there's certain other qualities that are so important that age, to give them agency, right? A
Mm,
lot of people who end up in relationships such as this have conditioned victimhood, right?
right.
A sense of powerlessness. And if we can instead give our children a sense of agency, then there's less chance of that happening. If they know what healthy boundaries are, if they know that they are capable of things and they have a right to want things and think things and do things differently, and it's just really going to set a different tone.
Absolutely. So a little bit later on, listeners, we're going to be talking about a guide that Kira's put together, Parenting Through Healing, a gentle guide for traumatized parents. So you want to stay tuned. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that Kira's identified in their 10 common mistakes and how to grow beyond them. So more coming on this topic. I am really curious though, if you had a chance with your own children. How many children do you have?
I do not.
You do not. Okay. So I
Yeah,
was,
this is part of actually why this
oh,
is so important to me. I've worked with so many families over the
right.
years and in different countries, and um, in my relationships and in my own healing from my early trauma, when I started doing my recovery work, even before my marriages, to my early childhood trauma, um, I had made a decision that I didn't want to bring children into my life and be responsible in that way for them, um, until I felt that I had come to a different place myself, that I had done enough of that inner work, that I had the energy, and that I was with the right person or in the right state. And trust me, there were, I could say, somewhat unfortunate situations where that nearly became not the case in my marriages, um, and in my marriage, and but I managed to maintain that for myself. But
Mm,
there are many, many parents who aren't able to keep that, or don't recognize that, or and there's zero judgment on that, zero judgment. Um, but for me, I'm working with children, and it gives me the capacity to be able to help those parents, and give them the time that they need, and hold the space for them. And if one day that I am blessed with that opportunity, then wonderful. That right now
mm.
my mission in life has been serving other families.
I so respect that decision, Kira, and I wish more, like, listeners, note number one, right? Takeaway number one. I wish more parents would be more thoughtful about it before they got too far down the path. I remember, I had my son fairly late, and I remember um, there was a little bit of an indicator at around 3 months that something was maybe off. And they asked me if I wanted to terminate the pregnancy, if I wanted to do an amnio, which is, putting a needle in the back of your spine and drawing out fluid, which sounds horrendous. And I said, like, it's taken me 2 years to get pregnant, for starters, because I'm older, right? And the thought of making that choice, I'm like, no, I don't want to be risking, first of all, the pregnancy, and secondly, whatever happens, we will deal with it, because we have been blessed by even getting pregnant after 2 years. And as it turned out, my son has special needs, and he's now 30. And yes, he still has some seizure conditions. Still has developmental delays. Those aren't things that he's going to grow out of. However, he is such a special person, and just lights up my life. And yeah, it's incredible what he's been able to accomplish, even as a special needs kid. So more parents, it's about being conscious. I think that goes without saying in all major decisions in life, but especially if you're bringing a little person into the world, because it's not like dogs where you have them for 10 or 12 years. You have them for your lifetime or the lifetimes that you have both together. So the thing about with kids is, yes, they might be grown up officially by 18, but they're not really grown. The problems that they're bringing back are just bigger. So what could we do differently as parents? What are some of your recommendations, Kira? What are some of the things, top 3 or 4 things that you wish parents would do differently from the get-go that would make the biggest difference to them having healthy kids that are happy and able to really learn and grow and thrive in school and in life?
One thing is this concept of my child is my life. Even though we just talked about how children are part of your life and are responsible for the rest of your life, when you have this concept of my child is my life, it actually puts a lot of pressure on the child.
Share more.
If they're your life, right, then what they do is impacting you. That's pressure. And if they don't see you having a life of your own, having your own dreams, having your own goals, having your own interests and desires and passions, then what is going to motivate them to do so?
Great point. Yes.
Right? If you want them to reach for their dreams, if you want them to see what it's like to just be caught up in something that they're just passionate about, then you need to know what that is for you, and you need to be able to take some time to do that, and they can model it for them. So that's one thing. Like, if they're the number one priority, that's wonderful. Of course, put them above your work, put them above your friends, okay, other things perhaps, but you still have to take care of you. You have to show that we're not raising sheep, right? We're raising humans. They're coming into this lifetime with things that we don't yet know, because we came in with a different mission. We came in a different generation, a different time. So we have to be open, secondly, to the fact that they're going to teach us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's the second biggest thing. One, recognizing, okay, you get to be your own individual. And 2, they get to be our teachers, right? When a parent get that whole idea of, I'm the older person and I know better, you have more experience, true, but that doesn't discount the wisdom that children have and what they're bringing in from the other side that's still fresh in their energy and in their mind.
Yes.
Can't be discounted.
Yeah, I liken it to a few years ago, I was designing and chairing a mentorship program. And at the time, I had several of the most seasoned women in the association that I was doing this for saying, well, I'm not sure if I have time and I'm not going to learn anything from this. And at the end of the mentorship program, pretty much all of them, when we did some feedback loops afterwards, shared back how much they had actually taken away from the experience, how much they had learned, because they were looking through the lens of much younger eyes in many instances. And sometimes it was the innocence of the question that was the most intriguing part of the conversation that it led to. Sometimes it was also just giving them a different perspective on, you know, the life of a youngster these days, because as older parents, we you know, I mean, to me, it's stunning some of the things that I heard about that are going on in schools these days. In Canada, this is not in the US, where, you know, they have different gun control levels, but I'm talking about here in Canada. It was shocking to me. Yes. So when we can start really young, when we can be the role model that, yes, we're both going to be learning as we go. We're not necessarily either of us going to be perfect in this. We're coming at this from a place of love and understanding and appreciation, but role modeling so important, because, you know, kids don't do what we tell them to do, they do what we show them to do. And that's why we have that expression on the airlines of, you know, put your own air mask on first before helping others, because if you're not a stable role model, then it's really hard to model that for your kids. Yeah,
that's a beautiful analogy to bring in right now as well, because that is so pertinent, especially for parents who've come out of trauma, and or come out of, you know, toxicity, whatever layers, you know, and level and depth it is. And they often are in a state where, you know, they've been in the survival mode for so long,
yeah,
and hyper vigilant, and, you know, so their system is all like, ugh, tight, and, you know, on alert, and dysregulation is such a common thread. And it is so hard for the parent then to support the child and their big emotions when they are triggered as well by them, or when they have such a narrow window of tolerance because they're exhausted.
right.
And so it's imperative that they learned to put on that oxygen mask. They learn to take time for their own healing, to understand their own emotions, to learn those techniques that they can then serve their children with.
Right. So although it seems like common sense, right? Apparently common sense is not so common anymore. However, there are some fairly simple concepts that can be applied that make a world of difference. What could be two or three of those simple things that can make a massive difference to how well adjusted, well behaved, how kind and compassionate your children are? What can we do as parents?
One thing is the communication. Children get frustrated when they can't express themselves and they don't feel heard,
Mm,
or when they're trying to express themselves and it's not clear. So one thing is really important is to speak to them so much in the early years. We often limit our sentences and what how we speak to them, and you get the baby talk in there, and but scientifically it's shown linguistically, when you speak to your child in complete sentences, that's how they're picking it up, and they're going to get more. When you address things like, oh, that's a bear, yes, you're right, it's a bear, and you repeat things, and like, this bear is brown, yeah, you're repeating things so much. If I take a child out for a walk, I am constantly talking, even if they're in the stroller and they're 2 years old. I'm like, oh, look at the seagull, do you see the seagull over the water by the boat? And
right.
I'm constantly talking to them so that they have that language. And that comes also really an important part with emotions. There's so much more than happy and sad and mad.
Mm-hmm.
They need to understand the degree, right? Are you furious? Like, are you a little annoyed, right? Are you happy, like so excited? Are you just feeling content?
Right.
Understand those degrees. So then they, okay, are you a little annoyed right now? right? And he's like, okay, so you're not furious. So because each of those things can have different strategies to release those emotions and get them out. So having them, giving them the gift of communication is one of the biggest ways. And the simplest thing that you can do is to use language with them, to talk with them a lot about like everything that you're doing. Like just kind of like if you were narrating a silent movie.
Mm,
Right?
right.
And just play it all out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it starts at pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
There isn't a stage where it's really too early to be talking to your baby, and that feeling of nurturing and being loved and welcomed into the world, starts really early. I remember with my son Alex, he was very interested in cars, and so for us to be teaching him, his basic numbers, his colors, um, anything to do with cars, that was the way to do it. So, how many wheels on this car? Is it a tractor that has 3 wheels? Is it, well, actually, in that case, it was 4, but is it a tricycle that has 3 wheels? What color are the wheels? What color's the car? And so there was, a very easy way to keep him engaged because he had demonstrated that early passion, even though his reading skills were, that was one of the areas impacted with his social development and developmental delays. But the opportunity is still there. And now he loves color, he loves painting, and he's very creative with all of his artwork that he does, and has managed to sell enough paintings to raise money for Operation Smile, 5 surgeries for Operation Smile, actually, through his artwork. So the things that we did with him as a kid have carried over, and obviously he's learned a lot of things in the meantime.
Yeah. And
So,
that just takes simple observation. Yeah.
yeah.
What do you seem drawn to? I had a parent once ask me that, her son was like intrigued about insects. And it's like, it's okay. I'm like, oh my God, it's great. I'm like, you can create so many lessons around insects. Besides, movements and body powers and senses. And it's totally fine that he loves insects.
Yeah,
Use that to
absolutely.
your advantage, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's awareness, just observing what are they drawn to. And
Yeah.
yeah, for sure, when it comes to education and by using those interests to get them engaged and participating with you. And
Right.
so, yeah, so
Much easier than pushing water uphill, right? To
yeah,
go with the flow where you see the water
exactly.
flowing, right?
Yeah. So awareness of your child's differences in personality is
Mm-hmm.
big, and awareness of how they react to different people, noticing their body language in different situations. So awareness and observation is the second key.
Mm,
Giving them ability to communicate through speaking with them, and then observing them in different situations with different people and noticing their body language.
excellent.
Because before a tantrum or a meltdown, often you'll see like a tightness, right? Or you'll see a, a volume increase and, in something like when they want something, or there's some, sighing or something that'll be characteristic to your particular child. You'll see there's some like signs often before it's not just, oh. Mm.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because when you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, sort of in the green room, if you like, preparing for this segment, I was talking a little bit about Caesar Milan, right? The the dog whisperer, and it's always it's not the dog, it's always the owner that is the one that needs the work, and watching for the cues, whether it's ears back, tail up, etc. Obviously kids are so much more special than any, dog could ever be. Well, I don't know, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for saying that. We'll see how the listeners respond. However, when it comes to our children, there are things that we can watch for. There are signals, there are signs. And when we can pay attention instead of being, on our technology, really dialing in and saying, okay, so what happened just now? What did that example lead to? And as parents, having a chance before bed to debrief with the other parents so that one person gets the benefit of the other person's learnings, I think is so important. What other strategies would you be suggesting and recommending
around
this topic of awareness and trauma, and even things that you've observed that are very often triggers for why kids react and what we can do about it? That's a lot of questions in one, isn't it?
It kind of is a few different things there, but that's okay. I like your idea of debriefing, and I think it's important to do that with a child as much as the other parent. If you're a single parent or you're partnered, either way, it's important to do that with your child as well. And one thing that's funny, I see when, for example, if they are starting school and they just come home and they say, "Oh, how was school?" That's such a vague question.
Right.
One of the biggest things that you can do is learn how to ask great questions.
Yes.
Remember, there's who, where, what, why, how, when, which, there's are there, is there, like there's so many questions. And open-ended questions are great. They're key to really connecting with your child and understanding. So instead of just saying, how was school, ask, what did you learn? What made you smile at school today? Who was kind to you? Or was there a surprise at school today? Or when did you have a happy moment? Or was anything difficult today?
Right.
So being more integrated in your questioning rather than vague, and be specific and sometimes also open-ended, but more directional.
Yes.
So that's one thing that's really key is questions. I was working with a 4-year-old child who was having issues going to sleep, and one thing is he kept bringing up there's like monsters or ghosts. And we had this discussion as well about, or I had a discussion with somebody else actually about what to say in this situation, because it is common for parents to either say there's no such thing as ghosts, right? Or like to just push it off, right? Or to say you don't need to be afraid, right? And just kind of leave it at that. But that doesn't give the child anything to work with. Or they're like, oh, were you scared? Like, and they're bringing their own emotion into it. When I was working this child and you brought up the monsters again, instead of feeding that fear or that concern, instead I asked questions. What does it look like? How big was it? Did it have a name? Did it say anything to you? What did it do when it was in your room? And this is bringing them into their logic instead of their amygdala.
Right.
Right. And having that awareness that they observe some things. When you observe things, you're stepping away from feeling that, right? You're like, oh, wait a minute. And it had a name, and then we could come up with what to do if he comes back again, what to say. You say, you're not welcome here, right? You're not welcome here. You need to leave. You need to go. And but it's through asking questions that it's diffusing some of that emotion.
Brilliant. I liken what you're sharing to a little bit of in my previous life. I mean, now I'm predominantly working doing executive coaching. So I work with women entrepreneurs who are seeking to flourish, women entrepreneurs and leaders, professional women. In my previous work, I did a lot of recruiting, so HR, attraction, retention. And one of my favorite questions when I was interviewing, having got through, meeting the person at the reception, walking down to the office where we were going to have the interview, and did you find the place okay? How's the weather out there? Like, general things to put them at ease. My first question was generally, tell me a little bit about yourself. And where they went from there told me a little bit more about their personality style. Did they dive into their credentials right away? Were they looking at, their family and the fact they had kids? I mean, because we're not allowed in Canada, obviously, to ask if someone has kids or if they're married. That's an illegal question. So if they volunteer, that's different. But again, it told me, are they an action-oriented person? Are they very structured and blueprint-oriented? Do they love knowledge and they went off talking about analysis and data and science? Or maybe they looked at me blankly and said, well, what exactly is it you want to know? That alone told me something. Or whether they were action-oriented and they went off talking about their credentials and their accomplishments. And it was very interesting. With children, we are the parents. So yes, we have the opportunity to guide, to shape, to be as inquisitive as possible. How often is it that I hear parents saying, oh, the questions are endless, why? It's exhausting. Well,
turn the tables.
I was going to say, flip it around, right? And let's have some dialogue going on, because there is so much value in the capacity for children to not only have great communication skills, but also to not be afraid about speaking up about their emotions, to not be afraid to ask a parent, can you share more about what you mean? Now, they might not say it like that, but just how they will look at you with a blank look tells you something about the fact that they might need a little bit more of an explanation. So,
it serves in other circumstances as well. Like say a child like falls, right? Or they drop a book on their toe, right? Instead of and they start to cry, right? Or they drop in like, and the person like, oh, the parents, oh, okay. And they bring that, oh my God, are you okay? Right? Or the child starts crying right away. And we're like, oh, okay, you pick them up and you start comforting. But instead you say, oh, did that hurt? You're getting them to bring attention to their own body, right? And you say, what do you think you need? Right? What does your toe need right now? Do you think we need to put some ice on your toe? Does your toe need a kiss? Right? Should we call the ambulance? Right? And get them thinking that now they can actually think when situations happen, there are different options.
Right.
Right?
Well, it's also about getting them to be out of that moment of pain, right? Because as soon as we start sending, blood to the prefrontal cortex, we got to actually start asking questions. They've got to think about the answers. It's like dealing with an angry person. What's one of the best ways to diffuse an angry person is ask them questions, because they have a hard time being angry and thinking about the solution, thinking about the answer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Great input. This is such a valuable segment. We talked a lot about the topic of raising emotionally healthy kids. So definitely starts with great role modeling from the parents, showing that awareness, showing that involvement, being actively, what is it? Intentional parenting is what I tend to think of it as, right? So you're not just popping your kid in front of the TV while you go make dinner, but what could be a different way? What could be another way to keep the conversation flowing, to keep them engaged, to really be understanding, what is it that your child needs the most, and what is it that they know that you also need as well? Because as you say, you're role modeling it, right?
Structure.
Yeah.
Structure is something that is often, it kind of gets tossed to the side when challenges come up.
Okay.
And after a situation, perhaps where you have been in a harsh environment and it was highly controlled, parents then often go kind of swing the pendulum to the other side, where there's then no structure and no control, like no boundaries, and then that doesn't serve the child. Right. And so structure and consistency is extremely important. That doesn't mean there's no flexibility, right? But there needs to be structure and consistency, because children thrive, they feel safe when they know what comes next, when they know what to expect.
Right. Makes so much sense. So we talked a little bit about, emotionally healthy kids, cooperative homes. I think you've shared in one of your articles, abusers come in all shapes and sizes. So you cannot trust your eyes, and therefore must be in tune with and rely on your gut. You cannot wait to be rescued. So what would you share in terms of things that parents can be paying attention to, where there might be something going on outside of the home that needs addressing, where the child may not specifically speak up about it, but you can see that something has happened. How would you address that as an educator? What would you recommend?
One might be how clingy they are when they come back to you, right? If they don't want to leave you to go to that place, or when they come back from that place, they're so attached to you. That is something that you might want to explore. Another thing is really when you ask a child about, say, a person, even if it's their friend, if they kind of push the question aside, that might be something to consider as well. Because if they feel a certain way about that person or their experience with that person and they don't know how to express that, they might just push things away.
Right.
And so that's something as well. How willing are they to communicate? If they're at a young age and they can't yet communicate, think about how exhausted they are or how wired they are when they come back. Maybe they're not clingy. Maybe they just go lay on the sofa, or they go to grab their best teddy, and they just go sit to themselves like on the chair. How are they isolating themselves? Like, so kind of look at those things. What are the children doing? When you see emotion rising, they might not get angry. Instead, they might run to their rooms. And you recognize that this is a person who their survival response, even from a young age, you can recognize it's not to fight. Their survival response is to freeze,
right,
or to fawn, or to run away, flight, right? So you can actually notice children's survival responses from a young age, and that's important to see too. If they feel a big emotion running and they just cover themselves in a blanket, right? You can start seeing, okay, how can I help my child? Because they have big emotions. We see when they have a meltdown and a tantrum, my child needs help with their emotions. But the child that hides under a blanket equally needs that support to be able to talk about their emotions.
right.
And that's really important as well.
So the child that's in the store having the tantrum, and the parent very often is feeling, awkward, embarrassed, etc., because other people, it's getting a lot of attention. Other people, are looking. They're potentially judging. What would you recommend when we're out in public would be the best way to handle the child who's having the tantrum and the meltdown?
First thing is to forget the other people because they don't matter.
Yes.
They don't. The second thing is to look within yourself and how am I feeling in this moment? Because are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling shame? What is the emotion that you were feeling in that moment? Because that is about you, not them. If you grew up and you were criticized in public, or you were embarrassed, frequently shamed in public, then that is something that you need to address for you. If you are angry, then think about, okay, is this because you felt out of control when you were younger? And now when you're in a situation where you don't feel in control, then that brings this up for you. So the second step is to, what is it triggering you? What is that emotion that is triggering you? The third step is to breathe and then look at, what is this about? This may not be about the toy. This could be about the fact that they have had little sleep. They're hungry because we've gone to the store after school and they needed a snack, right? It could be that they see their best friend having this and they never have that. And now they're feeling like left out, or, jealous or envious and whatnot. And so they're not trying. You have to remember that they're not trying to embarrass you. They're not trying to push your buttons, right? They are just so full of emotion. And so in that moment, forget the other people, focus on you, and then get down on their level. Get down on their level, and you might just sit with them and say, hey, I see you're feeling a lot right now, right? And you can feel that. It's not going to change my answer. Right? We still can't have it right now. So you can assert the boundary. That's really important because they need to understand boundaries.
Mhm.
You also can let them know there's something else to look forward to. It's like, you know what? But this might be something that as the weather gets warmer, then we'll be having this. And we'll take this on our picnic. Or, you know what? Next week we're going here. That would be a good time for us to get this and have as a snack then. Right?
Mm.
Or if it's a toy, you say, oh, I see that you want that. I'm going to note down that you want this. And maybe if you believe in Santa, you could use Santa. Or you can say, I know your birthday is coming later. Or you can say, this might be something we can save up for.
Mm. That's a great, I love the saving up for. I had interviewed a expert on financial planning, talking about financial planning aids and tools for teenagers and kids. And so the saving up for concept, love that. That ties in nicely to her interview as well that we did a couple of months ago. Oh, so many things today. And so much of this is about language, and it's about paying attention to the language that we use. And, I will air the video, the intro towards the end of the show about my book, Words, Women, and Wisdom, The Modern Art of Confident Conversations. So much of that is about how we pay attention to our language, the language that we use, the words that we use. Some words instantly diminish our power, like the word just. I just wanted to ... Well, you just made it sound so small and insignificant. Why would anybody be listening? And then there are some power words that we can add in that make a difference. And when we as parents role model better, powerful communication techniques for our kids, no matter if they're young or if they're teenagers, it just makes such a difference. Now,
There
you
are a
also...
couple of words I'd love to point out on that topic.
Uh-huh.
One thing which is related to our previous situation is how often are you saying the word no? And it was such a restrictive word. And in situations like this, saying instead, not now,
Right.
right? Not yet, not in this moment, not in this circumstance. It really can help diffuse things as well.
Yeah.
And the word don't. When you're trying to change a child's behavior, the worst thing you can do is say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, because our brains are not wired for the negative. It doesn't register it. And that's why when you say somebody, for example, don't forget your umbrella, it's going to rain, don't forget your umbrella, they're going to forget their umbrella.
Yeah.
It's the only thing the brain is registering is forget the umbrella. So when you tell your child, don't run, don't run, don't run, right?
Mm-hmm.
All it's hearing is run, 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 run.
Right.
So instead, you need to phrase it of what is the behavior that you desire to see. Right?
Exactly.
Keep your hands away. You walk in the house. Like use it in the affirmative of what it is you want them to see. It's a huge shift for people.
Absolutely. I love positive language. Absolutely. We talk about as parents role modeling, and very at the very beginning of this, we talked a little bit about your own personal circumstance and why this led you to the work that you're doing. And I think that there's some important messages there. Certainly about being rescued. Would you like to speak a little bit about what you've learned in your own life lessons along that journey too? I think that's highly valuable for the women listeners in our audience.
I think myself and a lot of generations before me have been raised on Cinderella stories, so to speak, and waiting for that Prince Charming. And that is the case in so many scenarios, especially if you are socialized or conditioned into helplessness or powerlessness, in a way of you are at the effect of others.
Mm-hmm.
And that continues in. You're like, okay, I would love this, but it's not in my power to do that, or I don't have the right to say this, or all these types of things. Or maybe they'll change their mind, or maybe they'll see what's going on, or they'll see what's not working, right? Or they'll change. That's a big one. I'm sure many of our listeners have thought about or have heard that big one. Oh yeah, they'll change.
If you want change to happen, you
Oh,
have
you
to make
can't
it.
can't rely on that. You can't wait for that. You
Yeah.
can't wait for the shifts to happen by magic. You can't wish upon a star. Right? You need to make those changes. Many people know, like you said earlier, be the change you want to see in the world, but it's like a cliche that they ignore. But it is a universal truth that the only one that you can change is you. The only
Exactly.
one that can change your circumstances is you. That
Right.
starts with changing your thought patterns, because your thought patterns create your habits, and your habits create momentum, which creates your success or your lack thereof it. So it really is imperative to realize that the biggest thing that you can do is to find the way, find a path, and find the people that will help you, not do it for you, but to help you feel safe enough to do what you got to do to re-empower yourself and regain, or gain perhaps for the first time in your life. Because I work with people who are 40 and talk to people who are 50, and they've never felt in control of their lives. They've never felt that they had a right to set boundaries, set tones, set limits, or choose what they want. And so it can be done at any age, right? But the sooner you start, the better it is. The better,
Absolutely.
the more you're going to gain out of the rest of your life, and the greater your opportunities and experience your children are going to have.
Absolutely. Well, I think through this interview, it's really evident to me, Kira, that your guide, Parenting Through Healing, a gentle guide for traumatized parents, you have invested emotionally as well as your teacher training, and all of your life experiences have been invested into creating this guide. Kira knows what she's talking about. So if we're looking at how you are helping others in the world now, you're working with families through your own organization, Be the Light. And where can people pick up this Parenting Through Healing guide? I teased them a little earlier and said, stay to the end, because where can they get it?
Actually, we'll be able to offer the listeners a link to the file in a Dropbox so they can download themselves.
Okay.
This guide, you don't even need to sign up for anything. Everything's about email capture at the moment. But I'm giving this to you completely without any obligations, without any contraction or anything. It's just for you to sit down and realize that there are things that you have the power to do differently. And
Mhm.
this is not about looking at everything you're doing wrong. This is to bring awareness to shifts that you can make that will benefit your children and yourself, because it'll bring more harmony to your home, which is good for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
It's a very practical guide. It's very simple introduction to what these mistakes are, why they happen, what the impact is, as well as some strategies for shifting them. And
Mhm.
what I highly suggest is that you do the rating that I put on there, rate yourself on how often that you find yourself doing this, and then try to implement some and come back after a month. And then rate yourself again and see if you still feel the same or things might have moved.
I
And
love.
there are 10 things. You're not going to relate to all of them. And I highly doubt, okay, I highly doubt you're going to relate to all of them. There'll probably be like, 2 to 4 that you're like, okay, I do this. And I was like, man, not so much. And you're like, I think I'm guilty of this one, right?
Okay. So we've got the guide. People can reach out and connect with you on your Facebook page, Be the Light for Them. And then also you have some videos on YouTube, or you have some education on YouTube that you also is another way that people can keep in touch with you.
So there's a couple of things. Yes, I have my own YouTube channel, Kira Conlon, and I will be putting more videos out there in the coming days. I also have a separate channel. And the tag is at Starlight Loves to Read. Starlight is my alter ego. As a unicorn, I am reading stories with a message for children. So I've curated 3 lists. There's bedtime stories, which are really just about love and connection. There are everyday life stories about starting school, going to the dentist, having getting a new baby brother or sister, right?
Oh,
These kind of life experiences that children face. And then there's another stream, which is dealing with the bigger emotions of worry and anger and grief. And so the channel is meant to be a bridge to allow you to have something to start that conversation with the children, or for them to watch something and then you can say, hey, you remember when they saw that in that story? And throughout, I will bring in some dialogue, or like, do you feel that sometimes? Or, and at the end, say, it's okay, you know, if you do this, or so I speak through it as well. And it's
brilliant.
just meant to be something that brings a light touch to sometimes some heavy things.
Brilliant. So lots of ways to keep in touch with Keyra, Keyra, Conlin, Conlinn. Any final words, life lessons that we didn't talk about today that you think are really important things you want to share before we start to wrap up?
Yes, there's a question that when people start doing some recovery work, they're often asked that I feel is incomplete,
Mm,
because sometimes they ask, did your parents love you?
mm,
And that question kind of brings people to maybe a sense of defensiveness if they want to defend their parents, or they look at it, yeah, yeah, they love me. But the question that needs to be asked instead is, were you loved in the way that you needed or that you wanted? There's a
mm,
big difference between those two things,
yeah,
because you can say and acknowledge, my parents loved me. I know they loved me, but they still weren't able to give me the love in the way that I needed. They weren't able to provide that for me. And when you recognize that, you then can see, okay, what do I now need to give to myself? And how do I make sure that I am loving my child in the way that they need to be loved? It's the same as a teacher. You need to teach not just the way you learn, but the way the children learn. So we need to be able to love our children the way that they feel loved, not just the way that we feel loved.
beautiful. I love that so much. So today we've learned a lot about this, this idea of helping our children to be better humans by being more effective parents, a lot about communication. Keyra also has a course coming up, a new path moving from chaos to connection, which is all about raising emotionally healthy kids in a cooperative home. So there'll be more information coming out about that, maybe through your Facebook page. Is that where?
And if you're curious, you also can email info@justbethelight.com. .ca,
Info,
my bad, .ca.
at justbethelight.ca.
.ca. Mhm.
Okay, to learn more. Excellent. So I'm going to leave this running. I've mentioned a couple of times throughout this conversation, because it's really all been about communications, clear communications, asking for what we want, recognizing what we need, what others, especially our children, need, and how to have a more harmonious home, which I think everybody benefits from. Also, the reference I made earlier to my best-selling book, Words, Women, and Wisdom: The Modern Art of Confident Conversations. There's actually a chapter in there about how to have a more harmonious home. There's a chapter about self-talk. There's a chapter about having a better working environment, and how to ask for a raise, ask for a promotion, say no to your boss when things are clearly, if you're being asked to stay late and you've got to pick up your kids, for example, how to handle that. So that's going to be coming up next in just a moment. The video will play and that'll tell you a little bit more about the options for the book. I have really enjoyed our conversation today, Keyra. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope the listeners will take you up on your offer of not just the free parenting through healing guide and the action items from that, but also to be keeping in touch, taking advantage of your generous offer for this new path of moving from chaos to connection. It sounds like a really interesting journey, and I think something that every parent should at least check out. Thank you today for joining me. I've enjoyed this conversation so much.
Thank you, Yvonne, so much. I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Listeners, stay tuned and make sure that you come back for the next edition of the Words, Women, and Wisdom radio show. Check into my YouTube channel as well, where you can also see replays. And as Keyra said, info@bethelight.ca, and then you can also connect with her, Kara Conlon, on her YouTube channel, or Starlight Loves to Read for those communal opportunities for reading and understanding with your kids as well. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I hope that you've learned some valuable gems today. I know that I certainly have. Thanks, Kara. Bye for now, everybody. Ladies, a new book is on the horizon. Words, Women and Wisdom, the Modern Art of Confident Conversations. This new book is for women ready to rediscover their inner confidence, take a stand for themselves in life and business by using more powerful language. Words are so powerful and already changed history. On October 5th, the New York Times published a story detailing decades of allegations of sexual harassment against film producer Harvey Weinstein. And numerous women in the entertainment industry found the courage to go public, banding together with a powerful voice that change is long overdue. Even Oprah Winfrey, television network icon, gave a rousing speech at the Golden Globe Awards in January. The media has showcased the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. The Me Too movement is flourishing and all signaling it's time for women's equality and change. I believe it's time to give women the verbal agility to create more confident conversations. Words, Women and Wisdom, the Modern Art of Confident Conversations is the book which provides practical approaches for women to ask for what we really want and receive our request. Hello, I'm Yvonne Silver, certified executive coach and senior HR professional, seasoned in business. I teach women to flourish in business by using more confident language to help empower and engage others. This book is the result of over 35 years of my career, professional career, working in 4 different countries. I've interviewed over 6,000 people in my career for job interviews, executive coaching, for sales and consulting conversations. And I've listened to hundreds of women in particular who are looking for a better way to collaborate. They're looking to be asking for what they really want and heard and validated, especially in business. And women often earn less than men for doing exactly the same job. It's 2018. It's time for change. The Modern Art of Confident Conversations explores words we use at home, at work, words that trip us up, elevate us and encourage us, and when no words are even required. It is about how to leverage the power of words in a positive, in a collaborative and impactful way. Now I work with women entrepreneurs and leaders who are empowering other women and leading through mentorship programs and my coaching, public speaking, interviews, and writing. I'm passionate about women's equality. Why? I grew up in England in a house with a flow of negative comments from my father which destroyed my mum's dignity until she became an empty shell of the vibrant woman she'd once been, belittled by constant criticism and questioning of her abilities. Through my own life journey and supporting hundreds of female clients, I've discovered critical words to ask to get what we really want collaboratively. I know there are critical links between our language, our behavior, our mindset, and our success in life. Words from a song can replay in our head for hours, and poetry can bring a lump in our throats. I've combined my insights with interviews from influential women, sharing their pearls of wisdom, supplemented with research and reference studies from established scholars. Women are rising up. It's time for women to be heard. Let's use more powerful, positive language and join the rising tide of change. This book is for you, a woman looking to the future, ready to embrace significant positive changes in your life by using more confident language. Eliminate those words that drain your power, add words that energize and invigorate, and shift from ordinary to extraordinary. Just one word can change your life. I believe Every woman needs their own copy of this powerful book. It's time for action and time for change. Order and reserve your own copy of Words, Women and Wisdom today.